Hello everybody, and welcome to a tutorial for the video game Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress is a fantasy world simulator, where the player generates a world and then interacts with it. There are three primary ways that the player can interact with the world and its simulation. The first, and most well known, is Fortress mode. In this mode, you build a fortress primarily filled with dwarves, and do your best to manage them and try to keep them from falling into absolute chaos. The second is Legends mode. This is a text readout of the entire chronological history of the world that you've generated, including your own interactions, as well as the things that the world has been doing behind the scenes while you're playing the game. The third and final mode of play for Dwarf Fortress is what we're going to be covering in this video, and it's called Adventure mode, which presents the game as an open-world RPG, in the style of a traditional roguelike. You can wander around, accept quests, kill monsters, find companions, and lie about who you truly are. You can pet the dog, spit on the wall, and fight bandits and bad guys, or join them. It's a very open game and can appear quite daunting. So if you're brand new, hopefully this video will be your guide to get you started with Adventure mode. I'm not going to cover every single minute detail of how to play the mode. I just hope that this video will serve as a primer to help you get the basics down packed and have enough information to begin embarking on your own adventures. While these three modes of play are all very different from one another, they all subtly affect the world and help it change and evolve as you play multiple forts and adventures in the same world. If this is your very first time seeing Dwarf Fortress, I also have a tutorial covering Fortress mode. This video's been out for a while, but is still very relevant. I'll leave a link in the description. But let's dive into the game itself. The first thing we're going to do is create a new world. Now, of course, you can always use a world that you have generated already and played forts in. Save files for Dwarf Fortress are almost always compatible between updated versions. However, sometimes they add new features, and sometimes these features require generating a new world to get access to them. So if you're watching this video right when it was uploaded and haven't generated a new world recently, you might want to make a new one right now. There's been a few things added that are worth checking out. If you're watching this video later down the line and the video's been up for a while, don't worry about it. You're probably good to go. The settings I used for this world are pretty straightforward. I set the world size to medium. I decided to let the world generate for 250 years. I left just about everything on default except for resources and minerals, which I moved down to sparse. Personally, I think sparse is a little bit more interesting, and it requires a little bit more digging when it comes to finding good materials for weapons in Fortress mode and Adventure mode. It's my preferred setting, but honestly, you can generate just about whatever kind of world you want. Once the world is finished generating, I select the Play Now option, and we are presented with the character creation screen. We now have three destinies to choose from for our character: Chosen, Hero, and Ordinary. The first option is Chosen, on the left here. It gives you a omnipotent being, in the form of a god, who gives you some direction, will push you towards temples, and give you a basic quest line. This is intended as a playthrough option for people who would like a little bit more direction. The middle option is Hero, which is what we'll be using in this tutorial, where you're kind of on your own, but still have access to those chosen quest lines if you seek them out. Both Chosen and Hero options provide a compass in the top left corner of the map, indicating where you are traveling. The third and final option is Ordinary. This is kind of your open sandbox mode. There's no direction whatsoever, and you are not provided with a compass, so navigation might be a little bit more difficult. The main difference between these three options is what kind of character you can play as. Availability for different factions and character types might be limited on the Chosen mode, because it requires certain parameters in the world generation to be available, whereas Hero and Ordinary will allow you to play in more strange circumstances, and have a wider variety of character options. But, as I said before, with the caveat of less direction. But as stated previously, for this video we will be playing as a hero. I'm going to leave the tutorial enabled because it walks you through the UI, and I might as well do that anyways. Of course, once you've seen the tutorial, feel free to disable it. Beneath that are the three difficulty options. This doesn't actually change the game whatsoever, but it does change the amount of skill points and resources you can start with. Playing on hard difficulty is kind of a 0 to hero situation, and it provides you with a lot less points to spend. Normal difficulty gives you some more, and easy gives you so much you can basically start as a god. Spend the points how you wish, but just realize that the difficulties are not going to make the encounters any easier. It's simply a head start at the beginning of the adventure. Once we've selected our destiny and difficulty, we are presented with the character type selection screen, which gives us the basis for our future adventurer. If this is your first time playing adventure mode, I recommend you play either as a goblin or a dwarf. The elves don't start with particularly great gear, it's all made out of wood. They do get some cool mounts though, and make for good companion characters. And animal people, and the experiments, presented by the moons here, can be odd sizes, and collecting gear for them might be difficult. If you do want to play as an animal person, I recommend you build a fortress for them first, and craft a bunch of gear and weapons that they can wear, and then visit that fortress as the adventurer, and collect those items before heading out into the wilds. The availability of different character types varies depending on what destiny you choose. The Hero Destiny allows you to play as any character type that is integrated into a civilization, allowing you to play as the characters presented here. Ordinary gives you the most variety, allowing you to play as any animal person or creature that exists within that generated world. Chosen will give you the least variety of characters available, just because in order for those quests to work, the location that you start in requires a temple, and not all places and civilizations will have that in every world. So if you select Chosen, and your options are limited, that is why. Once I have the dwarf selected, it presents us with our options for different starting locations. Not all locations can be started in as an adventurer, and in this case, it looks like we're going to be starting as part of a human faction for our dwarf. This can be a good thing, because they have different weapons available than dwarves, and different items that we could potentially start with. We have 3 options to choose from, and I select the Organized Confederation, because who doesn't like a good spreadsheet? Now we are presented with our home. This is where our adventure is going to begin. If we bring multiple party members, it'll give us multiple options of where we'd like to start. You can also have a party of different civilization origins. So you could have some elves and a dwarf that are part of warring factions. They just happen to be friends. When you select your starting location, it highlights it on the map. The game also highlights a little tooltip down here that indicates a little bit of information about that location. Once you've selected a location that you find suitable, you can then tab over to Occupation. And depending on what kind of adventure you would like to go on, you have a wide variety of different options. All of these occupations give the adventurer some starting skills. Not all of these can be used in adventure mode because crafting and fortress mode features are rather limited at the time of recording. The default is Hearth Person, which gives you some combat stats. I also recommend either Ranger or Hunter because that gives you some archery and dodge stats. For this adventurer, I'm selecting Hunter for the extra stats that are going to be quite handy once we get in game. And for beliefs, well, it appears that our dwarf here is agnostic. I guess the humans that we are living with don't like me so much. If there are religions available, it'll present you with a list, similar to the other lists. And of course, you can randomize all of these options instead of manually selecting them by clicking on the randomize background button. You can also select whether you would like to play a male or female character, and you can change your name, first name and last name, and write a custom one by clicking on the name field. Once you're satisfied with your backstory and starting location, you're then presented with your archetypes. Now, these are what kind of job you want to be actively doing after embarking on the adventure. You'll have your base skills from your occupation, and your archetype is the adventure that you're going to be going on. These are more representative of the different types of characters you can play in adventure mode. As you can see, you can be a bard, or maybe a poet or speaker, maybe somebody who walks around punching people, or perhaps a spear dwarf. If you would like to go in and completely customize all of these stats individually, you can either edit a pre-written archetype by clicking the Customize button, or you can select Blank Slate. Blank Slate gives you 0 stats whatsoever. If you have a very specific type of character you'd like to play, this is the best option. However, keep in mind, some stats may be difficult to acquire if you do not begin with them, so it's best to stick with the archetypes. Earlier, I mentioned that we're starting as a hunter for the extra stats. Just to show you the difference here, I'm going to quickly change my character from a hunter to a metal crafter. And then when I hover over the archetypes here, you can see the difference in stats available to me. My skills in dodging and ambushing are both lower, and I don't have any Marks Dwarf skills anymore. But I do have some metalsmithing skills. So if I would like to take this adventurer into fortress mode, and use them as my legendary weaponsmith, this would be what I would do. But we're going to continue with our hunter. And I'm going to select Axe Dwarf, because that's proper dwarfy. Next, we have the appearance screen. This one's very simple. Here's a description of your dwarf. If you don't like it, hit the randomize button. That'll give you a different description of your dwarf. This is all based on the available visuals and aesthetics of the faction that you're joining. So your dwarf will look similar to other dwarves who live in the general vicinity. Once you've found a look that you're happy with, you are then presented with your personality. On the right here, you can see your needs. Needs are things that you have to accomplish to keep your adventurer from getting upset. Most of these are pretty simple, and if ignored, won't cause you too many problems early on, but if you keep playing an adventurer for a very long time, they might get depressed if they really want to practice a skill, just as an example. Most of these are pretty easy to fulfill, and if you would like to customize them and have a very specific character, you can click on the full customization button. I wouldn't worry about this too much as a new player, but I would recommend having a peek at your goal. Your goal is what that character hopes to achieve with their life. Some are going to be much more possible than others. All adventurers are asexual at the time of recording, meaning it's best that if you want a happy adventurer who can achieve their goals, you don't dream of starting a family. Otherwise, that's just going to kind of lead to some existential dread in the future. However, dreaming of becoming a legendary warrior is much more achievable, or crafting a masterwork, or bringing lasting peace to the world. Once you've found a selection of personalities that you like, that suits a character that you would like to play, you can accept that personality, and we can move on to item selection and equipment. By default, you're given what is available to you from that faction. All of the items that you can select from are things that that faction has made and has access to. So if a certain material is missing and you feel confused, that might be why. Or if a certain item type appears sometimes but not others, that is also why. Not every item is available to every faction at any given time. If you would like to increase or decrease the quality of an item, you can use these little star buttons. Clicking them will make the value of the item higher, will also make it more durable, and make your dwarf appreciate it more. The plus and minus buttons increase or decrease the quantity of the item, and if you accidentally hit the minus button and it disappears, simply search for it in the search box up in the top right-hand corner. Items that have no use in adventure mode are listed as fortress mode items. While you can bring these with you, they are pretty much useless outside of throwing them at somebody's head, which is actually pretty useful if you think about it. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see how many total points you can spend. Increasing the value of items or the quantity of items will lower these points. This is what's governed by the difficulty options. And then the last screen is mounts and pets. This is pulled from the same points pool as the previous options. I'm going to grab us a little war dog. Of course, we could give them a name if we wanted to, same as our dwarf, or just hit the random button a few times. The last thing to mention before we begin this adventure and start talking about survival is that plus button up in the top left. If we would like to bring another party member, you'd click that plus button, or the add a party member down at the bottom right of the screen. But since you're still getting used to the nuances of adventure mode, I recommend starting with just one character. It's easier to manage. Now, without further ado, let's begin the adventure. Now, you're probably already aware of this, but adventure mode is quite a difficult game. So while playing as your adventurer, I recommend you save quite often, because there is no auto-saving in adventure mode, and if you die, your character is dead. Thankfully, the game includes several options and ways to save your game. The next small thing I'd like to mention before I start explaining the UI is Dwarf Fortress's adventure mode has a pretty decent tutorial. It does a pretty good job of walking you through all of the different UI elements and what they do on a very surface level. When you open up different menus, it'll pop up these little help screens that will give you some instructions. So I'm going to work under the assumption that you've already completed the basic tutorial. So let's dive into the menus and explain what they do. And if you're looking for something specific, check the timestamps. Combat and crafting, and survival, and overworld and fast travel will be split out separately. Right now, we're just going to cover the basic UI elements and what they do. The first button I'm going to click on is the Companions button. Because it's just the dwarf and his dog, there isn't anybody else listed here. But this gives you an indication on where they are. Sometimes you can get separated, and you might want to know what direction you have to walk in order to relocate them. Currently, our dog is just west of us, and it also indicates that they are lying on the ground, as displayed by the brown down arrows here. If they were blue up arrows, then the character would be in mid-air, or jumping, or being thrown. The next menu is the character screen, also known as your character sheet, if you play tabletop games. This has several different tabs which give you some information on the emotions and status and gear and health and skills of your character. This menu can be accessed by hitting Z on the keyboard, right-clicking your character, or clicking the small button down in the bottom of the screen. as I did initially. The overview screen is pretty self-explanatory, giving you a very brief overview of everything that's going on. Items is an alternative option to the inventory screen, which is one of the last ones I'll cover in this segment. During character creation, I sneakily grabbed myself a crossbow, as well as some bolts, just to show how archery works, and throwing. Every character starts off with a carving knife, unless you decide not to bring one. This is so that you can butcher animals in the crafting screen. Your health and status screens will show injuries and wounds if they're happening, and will give you a pretty good indication on if you're about to die or not. Thankfully, if you do die, it's no longer your problem, because you're dead. There aren't many ways to heal your wounds in Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode, but you can find some magical healing potions in the Stranger Dungeons. Those will be unique to your world, so good luck finding them, brave adventurer. There's also the Skills tab, which is very self-explanatory. As skills are leveled up, they will appear here in these lists. And you can see that there are these empty bars underneath my combat skills, and that's indicating how far it is to the next level. As these skills level up, we obviously get better at them. And if I'm not practicing them, I get rusty. That'll slow down the speed at which I can complete those tasks until I get over the rust. Adventure Mode is a turn-based game, so whenever I take an action, time moves. Almost all actions in-game take time. If I'm tired or exhausted, it'll take more time to complete an action. If I'm awake and in good health, actions will happen faster. Encumbrance can also be a factor on the speed at which your character moves, but we'll cover that when we get into the inventory screen. For now, let's focus on relations. These are all the people that I know. Presumably, most of these people live in town, where we've started. The ones with the images visible are ones that are currently close by. The ones without are further away. The Groups tab shows what factions I'm a part of and the factions that I've joined. If anybody hates you and is hostile towards your character, this will be noted here as well. Traits, values, and preferences are all pretty self-explanatory, and if you spot tiers in your inventory, you might want to check your needs. This is how you maintain a good amount of mental health for your adventurer so that they don't become a blubbering mess. You may also notice these speech bubbles appearing off-screen. Those are people talking in the far distance. Hovering your mouse over them will give you an idea of what you're looking at. So if an icon appears, you might want to mouse over it. Just north, you'll also see that there is a grayed out area. This is an area I remember that I've previously seen. If your adventurer has bad memory, which can be adjusted in the stats screen, they'll forget these quickly. So sleep a few nights and you won't remember how you got to where you are. Next, I'm going to open up the log, and this has several very important tabs. The first one is events. These are known events in your region, and the one that is open by default. This will give you some idea of what's been going on in the general vicinity, and might direct you towards some adventurers, or quests. The Agreements tab, which is currently empty, is populated by quests that you've agreed to complete. Someone asked you to do a thing, fetch an item, kill somebody, and you're going to complete it now. Next is People, sort of like an expanded selection of the Relations screen that we saw earlier. This will add some additional information on what you know about them, and perhaps what they know about you. Sites is also very useful, which has the name and location of every single area surrounding you. These can be filtered by important, which includes places with agreed quests or known events, such as wars or beasts or thieves, and is always worth looking at when you're trying to figure out what to do next. Next we have Groups. These are known factions in the world, and if you sort by important, it'll show the ones that you were a part of. Regions is also quite handy. It gives you an idea of what's surrounding you, and where to go to find certain types of places, or various kinds of plants and vegetation. Right next to that is the Bestiary. As you scroll and search through the different animals that exist in the world, if you are aware of where to find them, the game will highlight that, indicating you should go to a certain place if you're looking for a certain kind of game or creature to fight. This can also be very useful if you're looking to found a fortress in a particular region with certain types of animals. The Artifacts screen is pretty self-explanatory. These are known artifacts that exist in the world, which is currently blank. And lastly, we have Intrigue. As you collect and accept quests, this menu will fill out, or as you hear rumors of different criminal organizations, or mercenary groups, or bandits, perhaps even some thieves. The next menu we're going to have a look at here is Movement Options. I'm skipping over Inventory. We'll do that in its own block. Movement Options indicate how fast your character moves per turn. Your visual stealth is your current stealth, and won't change until you swap movement options. Jogging, running, and sprinting will tire your character out quicker, but will train some endurance. Creeping and strolling will move much slower, but you won't be noticed as easily. If you decide to change these settings, do keep in mind that you do need to switch them back, even if you fast traveled. So if your adventurer is perpetually exhausted and falling on his face constantly, it's possibly because you forgot to turn off sprinting. I've done this many times. The next button here is related. It's called Stealth. Turning it on enables the vision cones for things around you, and gives you a slight stealth boost. This is quite handy when trying to hunt or sneak up on something, or when you're trying to get past some guards, so that you can sneak into a fortress, or tomb, or other notable place. The last button on this piece of UI is Combat Options. I'm gonna save this one in case I do a advanced combat video in the future. But as a new player, just leave everything here default, and start to play with stuff as you gain some experience. Next, we have the Interact button. This allows you to pick up things in the environment, pick plants, as well as a myriad of other options, such as setting things on fire. Picking plants is very useful in the summer and late spring and early autumn when there's vegetables around. Berries can be consumed by most adventurers, unless it's a crocodile man who only eats meat. As you can see here, I've just made a quick campfire. We'll have to talk about these a little bit more when I get into the survival section of the video. There's also a context-sensitive menu. When you right-click on the environment, as you can see, I have all sorts of options to heat things on this campfire. And when I right-click next to my character, I can pick leaves, set them on fire, or move to that location. I could also gather some dirt, if I want, but there isn't much reason to do that. The next thing is Climb and Hold Terrain. The climbing button allows you to climb up walls, if your hands are empty. If your hands are full, this is going to be mighty difficult, and the game will not allow you to climb. This is also how you would get onto a mount, such as a horse or a camel. The climbing menu is a little bit slow to use. However, if you move the camera up several Z levels, you can right-click a location and say move to here. The character will automatically climb there, if it is possible for them to do so. I recommend becoming a little bit acquainted with these movement options before you start trudging out into the wilderness for your adventures. It's also worth noting that climbing is a skill that is learned. However, you only gain climbing skill if you're climbing on constructed walls. Unfortunately, climbing trees, which are rather easy to climb, do not give you any climbing skill whatsoever. It's a little bit odd, but it's just the way it works. Now that I've climbed back down, the next thing we have here is the ability to start a performance. And in the skills and selection screen, for this character, I also took a couple points in poetry and one in writing. If you have a point in writing and a point in poetry, you also have the ability to compose music, compose poems, and create choreography. This is a fun little side hustle that you can interact with if you wish. It's all pretty straightforward and allows you to write some terrible poems. Performing music or giving a sermon in public will cause people to crowd around you and listen to what you have to say or sing. If you're bad, they'll remember this. If you're good, they'll remember this. And you might even develop a devout following of fans of your music. Or people that literally ask you to leave when you walk into the room because of how badly you performed last time. Next, I would like to draw your attention to the top right hand of the screen. As you can see, it is raining currently, where I have moved to. The second option says that the sky above you is uniform and dark gray, meaning it's cloudy. The game informs me that there is a strong breeze blowing from the east. This can impact smells, but isn't something you really need to worry about as a beginning player. Next is the time of day. The sun is directly above us and behind the clouds. Most adventurers need to sleep, dwarves and humans alike. Goblins and elves, however, do not. Most mortal characters do not need to sleep. So if you are a vampire or a necromancer, you probably don't need to worry about this. However, if you're playing a normal adventurer, you may want to keep an eye on the time of day, because if you get drowsy and begin to develop a mild case of narcolepsy, that might be bad for your health if you fall asleep mid-fight. Lastly, we can see that it is cold. This can impact our ability to acquire water or liquids for drinking when our character gets thirsty. In Fortress mode, dwarves primarily drink alcohol. In Adventure mode, dwarves primarily drink water. Alcohol is more of a rare treat, and if our water freezes, we'll need to thaw it out. But I'll cover that when we get into the survival section. Next is the tracking menu. If enabled, it turns on the tracks overlay. As you can see, as I move around, I am leaving tracks, and so is my companion. Hovering my mouse over them will indicate whether or not they're mine or someone I know's. This is very useful when trying to track down things that you would like to kill for food, or an enemy that's running away with an item that you want. Next, we have the directional indicators for ramps. You can enable and disable water depth indicators as well, and of course, manual buttons for zooming in and zooming out. The last piece of UI I'm going to talk about before diving into the inventory is the compass. This is available if you're playing a chosen character or a hero character. This will not be here if you're playing an ordinary character. There is currently no way to acquire a compass, so if you would like directions on where your nearest quest is, or what's around you, you'll have to play as a hero. Now it's time to tackle the inventory screen, which is down here in the bottom left. There's a lot of different options here, so let's discuss them. I'm going to use my breastplate as an example. If I click remove this item, it takes off the breastplate. Now it's in my hand. Also, because it's out of my items that you are wearing, get a bonus to your ability to carry them. And because I'm no longer wearing the breastplate, we are now considered encumbered, indicated right here. 85 Dwarf units is the maximum I can currently carry. As a secondary indicator of when you are encumbered, down here, there's a little icon indicating weight. If I would like to re-equip an item, I can click this button, wear an item, and any items that I'm currently holding that can be worn will be shown here. I'm going to re-equip the breastplate. Now let's drop something. I can either press D on the keyboard to open up the context-sensitive menu of things that I can currently drop. You might notice that I can't drop my breastplate. That's because I'm currently wearing it. If I would like to drop the breastplate, I would have to remove it from my body first. The water in my inventory here is in this water skin. If I reopen the inventory screen and scroll down, you can see it here as well. I'm going to drop my crossbow. Now you can see it's on the ground. This button down here allows me to draw and put away my weapons, or I can hit Q on the keyboard. Since my weapons are now out, I could drop my weapons, which were previously strapped to my back. Opening up the inventory screen again, I can now drop the item or put the item into a container. Putting items into containers is how you put items onto a mount. If I had a mount close by, such as a horse, it would give me the option to put it on the back of the horse. I'm going to put my buckler into my backpack. Now I'm going to move over to my crossbow and right-click and hit Get Crossbow. I could also press G on the keyboard. It automatically puts it into my hand. If I press Q, it'll put them onto my back. Pressing Q again will bring them back out. But how do I get my shield? Opening up the inventory again, I can put this copper crossbow into a container, and I put it into my backpack. Now I could either hit R on the keyboard to remove an item from my backpack, or click on the inventory and scroll down to my buckler. Then I click remove this item, and now it's back in my hand. Juggling items in and out of your hands is one of the more complicated concepts of adventure mode, but allows for a wide variety of things to be thrown, picked up, dropped, and fought with. But if you try to complete an action and it fails, or alternatively you try to complete an action and it says you don't have a free hand, it means there's probably something in your inventory that you need to get rid of. The inventory screen has several other very important options as well, such as eating or drinking an item. If you select this, it gives you options of everything that you could theoretically try to eat or drink, such as these intestines. These are my meals. If my character is hungry, a hunger indicator will appear down in the bottom left. But we'll discuss eating and drinking when I get to the survival section of the video. The last thing I would like to mention in the inventory is the interact option. This is pretty important. It's how you read books and complete more complex tasks, such as throwing them, which is the only default interaction with the items in my inventory at this time. If you have a book, you would have to interact with the item. If you want to fill a water skin, you would have to interact with the item. The next thing I would like to cover is overworld fast travel. You can start fast traveling by hitting capital T on the keyboard, or by selecting the map button. Fast traveling is how you get from one location to another. Of course, you could just walk down in the main world screen, but then things would move much slower. So while not necessary, fast traveling is a very useful time-saving feature. It'll also indicate if there's a strange smell in the vicinity, as well as giving you a basic compass of things nearby. Currently, I'm in this human town. If I move, it'll say a floating site and unloads the region. And then up in the top right, we can see the general idea of what's around. If I wish to end my fast travel, I can hit this button. If I'm in a region full of hostiles, which appear as red dots on the map, we may want to sneak. And if I would like a more zoomed out version of the map, I can click this button. As you can see here, there are plenty of hostiles on the screen, as well as all of the locations that are commonly known to my faction. I can also disable the track view here, which we had enabled previously, which hides all known tracks. If I'm trying to find something to hunt, indicators will appear up here if there are known tracks nearby. The last thing is I can toggle weather patterns on and off. This can be useful if you want to know if it's raining or not, and also provides some interesting ambiance to the vicinity. Of course, there's also a quick option to get into the quest log here on the left, which we've previously discussed. Next, we're going to cover basic wilderness survival. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to wander into the wilderness, heading towards the colder regions up north. Something I should mention is while fast traveling, up at the top you can see a little circle moving across the top of the screen. That is the indicator of the day-night cycle. When that goes dark, it means the sun is down, and we're going to need to stop somewhere to sleep. There's also enemy entities on the map, and things going about their business. Be cautious of these, as they might instantly kill you upon encountering them. Sometimes they can even ambush you out of the fast travel screen, which can end poorly for an unsuspecting dwarf. Over there on the left is a large number of goblin settlements. They look pretty dense. We should certainly avoid those for the time being. Now, as you can see down in the bottom left hand of the screen, we are hungry and thirsty. If I hit Z on the keyboard, or open up the character sheet with this button, we are listed as both hungry and thirsty. We do have some food in my inventory, thankfully, but unfortunately none of the veggies around me are in season right now. When they're in season, lettuces and spinach and various other greens are edible, but unfortunately for us, we're stuck with hunting. So for this segment, I'm going to cover water and drinking, as well as defrosting frozen water and snow. Then we'll do some butchery and craft the remainders of that creature into something to trade at a local market. So, to quench our thirst, I'm going to right-click the screen for the context-sensitive menu and click Make Campfire. Now, as you can see, the snow around me is melting, and I have a fire. I'm now going to right-click the campfire and scroll down through the context-sensitive menu to my badger leather water skin, which has 3 pieces of ice in it. Alternatively, I could open up the inventory, scroll down to the bottom of this, go to my water skin, hit interact, and heat it. You also may notice that we could fill it with snow. Currently it's full, so we'll heat it with the campfire. Now that it's been heated, I can press E on the keyboard to open up the eat or drink menu. I can now drink the water. The icon down here is now gone. If I press Z, we're no longer thirsty, so it's time for us to eat our brains. I mean, intestines. I should also note that food does not need to be cooked in adventure mode, so it's not something you need to worry about. Now that we're no longer hungry and thirsty, I'm going to sleep. This can be accomplished one of 2 ways. Capital Z on the keyboard or clicking on the bed icon down here in the bottom right. And we're going to sleep for 8 hours. Keep in mind, if you sleep somewhere dangerous, you may get attacked in the night. I'm now awake, and if I open up my character sheet, we can see that we're hungry, thirsty, and stunned. I'm stunned because I only just woke up. I stand up and take a step. The stunned was also causing me to be over-encumbered, but now we've got food and water that needs to be sorted out. So let's make a campfire, and I'm going to right-click the snow. I'm going to fill the badger leather water skin with snow. Now that the snow around me is melting, I'm going to right-click on the campfire. Scroll down, we can see that we have ice and snow in my water skin. I'm going to heat the water skin on the campfire. Then I'm going to hit E on the keyboard, or I could open the inventory and select the consume button and drink one of the units of water that we just acquired. I'm going to quickly repeat this process in case you missed it the first time. Easy as pie. Now I'm going to consume my intestines. The next task that we need to complete is finding, killing, and butchering an animal. This can be difficult. Some smaller animals aren't butcherable because by the time I'm done killing it, the meat will likely be ruined. So we have to do our best to find something that we can eat. To do this, I'm going to head to a slightly different environment and travel slightly south, still being wary of all of those goblins and the goblin activity. After a little bit of walking, I'm already hungry and thirsty again, but there's an eagle here. Now, it might not be edible when I'm done killing it, but let's walk over some basic combat. If you're able to walk up to a creature without it noticing you or considering you a threat, you can click this sword icon. The sword icon will give you the option to attack the obese eagle, which in this case is a neutral entity. If it wasn't neutral, it wouldn't ask me for confirmation. Then I can either dodge it or strike it. This menu is pretty simple once you have a look at it. Think of it sort of like VATS from Fallout. You can select a limb or a body part, and if there's an exclamation point next to it, it's an attack of opportunity, which will give you a better chance to hit. Pluses indicate better hits, minuses indicate worse hits. The combat system is physics-based, meaning if something is moving away from you, it's going to be harder to hit. But let's go for a Hail Mary here, and see if I can strike it with my axe for this attack of opportunity on its head. We strike the obese eagle from behind and immediately kill it. Now let's see if we can butcher it. I'm going to open up my inventory after putting away my weapons and remove this bayberry wood carving knife. Swords are also usable as a way of butchering things. I hit X on the keyboard and we have the first option here, butcher, and it lets me butcher the obese eagle. It seems like our pupper here is helping. I select the bayberry wood carving knife. If you don't have one, I'll show you how to make one in a second. I've now butchered the obese eagle corpse. If I press G, we can see all the things I could pick up, or I could right-click and use the context-sensitive menu. Now take that eagle steak, and we're gonna eat like a king today. Well done, Dwarf, well done. I'm also going to heat up my water, which is currently ice, and give it a sip. Now the butcher screen also has several other options. The middle one is carve bone. We could make a bone gem, which can be sold or traded. I could make a crown or a bracelet, an amulet, a scepter, an earring, a ring, or a figurine. Let's make an amulet using the wood knife. Then I'm going to wear the amulet by pressing W. Or I could open the inventory screen, scroll until I find the amulet, and wear it. It's also worth noting we're a little bit encumbered right now, so I should probably drop some of my newly found meat. It's a shame to let it go to waste, but it's important to not die from carrying too many items. So instead I'm only going to pick up 2. Don't mind me while I quickly carve the rest of these into rings. We're going to use these for trading in a little bit, as a bartering item. This will over-encumber us, but as long as we don't get into combat, I'm sure we'll be fine. Now that all the bones are carved up and my inventory is full of trinkets, I'm going to put my knife away. And then I'm going to walk over here to these pebbles, and I'm going to press G. This is how you get a knife to butcher creatures if you don't have one, or you are lacking in a sharp object. Find some pebbles and get yourself a small stone, and then get a second one. You might notice I'm immediately putting them into my backpack instead of holding them in my hands. That's because my hands are super full of all of these crafts I just made. So I'm just going to toss these in my backpack real quick. Then I'm going to remove the 2 small stones and hold them in my hands. Once I've done that, I'm going to open up the butchery and crafting screen again. Then I'm going to make a sharp rock. A sharp rock requires 2 unsharpened rocks. You combine the 2 rocks, and now I have 1 sharp rock and 1 not sharp rock. I'm going to drop the non-sharp shale onto the ground. And now, when I'm in a situation where I need to butcher something, I can use this sharp shale as an item to butcher the creature, and then craft its bones into trade goods. Now I'm going to put the eagle meat that we've just acquired into my backpack, and I'm going to drop this shale that we sharpened. I'm also going to remove my carving knife from my upper body and place it into my backpack, so we can now re-equip my weapons. Of course, there's other food items on the ground here, but there's only so much I can carry at once. There's one other thing I need to cover in the basic survival section, and that is how to acquire water from a creek. You may occasionally notice standing water around the map. Standing water is not drinkable. However, anything in a river that is moving is. This is a river with fresh water. I'm not going to need to thaw this out. We're just going to have a real quick bite to eat first, and a real quick sip to drink. The indicators in here are indicating that there's fish in the water. Should be a little bit cautious about that. If I'm good at swimming, I could jump into the water and fight with them and butcher their bodies. But that can also be quite dangerous, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to fill my water skin at the river. If I press E on the keyboard and scroll down, I can also drink water directly from the river. You may notice that I'm starting to feel full. If I drink too much more or eat too much more, I'm going to start throwing up. And that's very bad. Being nauseous is a huge debuff and something you should be wary of. Now I've traveled back to town. There's currently a blizzard going on, and it's snowing quite heavily. And even though it's midday, our vision is restricted. That's because the sun is low and because of the snowstorm. If you look around, you'll notice that there's people everywhere. We're in a market. There are marketplaces all over the human towns. You can also find various shopkeepers. These characters would like to sell us stuff and have items next to them. If I would like to trade with one of these shopkeepers, I have to go up to them and right-click them. Then I'm going to start a conversation with them. I'm going to greet the listener, and they introduce themselves, and I introduce myself as well. Then we're going to continue the conversation by pressing K on the keyboard. There's 2 options here that you should note. One is exchange, give, take, or show personal items. That's to trade with them for items on their person, so their clothing or things in their pockets. Trade or settle debts is what you do if you want to barter with them. So we're going to barter. As you can see, they have several different items here. If I scroll down, at the very bottom we actually have some coins. These coins have a value. However, coins only have value in the faction that they were made in. So, these coins are currently worth something here. because we're still in the place that we started. But if I were to go to a dwarven faction, these coins would be worthless. Because I don't really have any skill when it comes to trading, I don't actually know the value of my items. So I'm simply going to ask for currency. I'm going to try for 50 coins and see what they say. Now they owe me 50 coins after completing the trade. Or in this case, 50 value worth of coins. So I receive Ladder Dipug, silver coins 4, and Sladder Dipug, Dastramunal, gold coins 2. And that concludes the transaction. I can now take these coins to another trader and purchase an item. My next goal is to find a tavern. Just north of me is the Decisive Cape. We're gonna try for that. Possibly somewhere where we could find somebody who's willing to tell me some rumors or some tales. If you see text popping up at the top of the screen, it can get a little cumbersome sometimes to clear it. But do remember that the text popping up at the top of the screen is often giving you rumors, which is probably populating your quest book, which we talked about at the beginning of the video. This is the sign for the tavern. If I view it, we can see that it is the almond wood sign. The slab reads, the Decisive Cake, and it's coated with water because it's raining. Inside of here is a lively bunch, and also an artifact. A dwarf, who happens to be some sort of criminal leader. I begin a conversation with the boss, and I'm gonna bypass the greeting. I'm a little concerned about giving this person my name. I'm gonna ask about any troubles, and they say that they've got beasts. I continue the conversation and ask about the beasts, and they say a force of evil has arisen in the world. Colm thought the hills of Erasure. Seek this place if you hunt Ulim Razorwall, the soldier of night prisoner. That's a night creature. Quite a threatening foe, but could be interesting. Let's see if we can locate it. I'm gonna ask them to give me directions to the location of the creature. And they say a comet knot is a day's travel to the west, and they give us a detailed description. I'm gonna continue the conversation with them and attempt to flatter them. They say spare me the compliments, and I take that as a sign that it's time to end the conversation. If you right-click on a character like this Swords Dwarf, you can actually click Items. This will indicate what hand they're holding their weapon in. Very important if you get into a scuffle. I'm also noticing these artifacts everywhere, and I have a feeling they may be valuable. And I don't think anybody's watching, so I'm going to grab this one, and then run just so north and pick this one up. I'm gonna place them in my backpack. I'm sure that many interesting events could happen if we stuck around this tavern, but I need to show you how to get a proper quest. One of the easiest ways to get a good quest in the early game is by finding a shrine. There appears to be one here. Let's see if there's a holy figure standing next to it. Here it is, this large structure on the surface. Let's see if somebody's home. I'm gonna use what I learned earlier to climb up the wall, or simply path to where they're located. This is a stout holy luxury. Somebody with a title like this is likely able to give us a quest, so I'm going to greet them, and they say praise Art. I don't know who Art is, but I guess he must be friendly. I'm going to continue the conversation, and I have an option here to offer my service. And they give us a quest. You are hereby charged to retrieve the elemental darkness from Murky Mirth, the luxurious coven. Murky Mirth and the Murky Bunch? I'm gonna continue the conversation and ask how the listener is feeling. They seem to miss somebody. Well, that's unfortunate. If I check my quest log now, we now have a quest. And it says that we have to retrieve the elemental darkness from Murky Mirth. Where is Murky Mirth? Well, there is Murky Mirth. We now have our directions and our quest. Now, it's worth noting that these early quests that you are given at the temples can sometimes be rather difficult to complete, but this character is likely strong enough to kill them, assuming my hands aren't full of whatever is currently in my hands, which seems to be those 2 artifacts I ran off with. Best put those in my backpack for safekeeping. If you would like this save file and attempt to complete this quest, there is a link in the description to the save file itself. Adventure mode is a very deep and sometimes daunting portion of Dwarf Fortress. It also is extremely open-ended, and can cause some people to feel confused and lost, and frankly overwhelmed with all of the options and things that you can do. My favorite way to play adventure mode is in between fortresses. Play a fortress for a while, affect the world for 10 years, and then play some adventures. Training can take time, and the combat system is complex and deep, but this wasn't an advanced tutorial. This was simply an introduction. If you liked this video, check out my YouTube channel. You can find me at youtube.com/blindIRL or on Twitch at twitch.tv/BLINDIRL. This video was commissioned by Kit Fox Games, so shoutouts to them. If you're watching it on their channel, hello, it's good to see you as well. If you're interested in more Dwarf Fortress tutorials, let me know down in the comments section. I'd love to know what you'd like to see, especially for adventure mode stuff. And if you have any tips for anybody else who might just be starting out, let us know as well. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care of yourselves, and I hope to see you in the next one.